Sarah and Jackson, who met on the tropical island of Mauritius, are together in a bar watching videos. They lived many adventures during a year there. Tonight is the last night they spend together before Sarah flies to London the next day to start a new job. She invites Jackson to go with her, but he decides to stay on the island, where he was very happy. There is a strange moment of silence, and Jackson offers another beer to Sarah. While he is away for a moment, Sarah decides to leave without saying goodbye, as she doesn't like farewells. When Jackson returns, confused and looking for Sarah, she is already gone. A year later, Sarah returns again to Mauritius Island for her best friend's wedding. Away from work, Sarah feels free again. She arrives at the house of an old friend, Solomon, on behalf of the bride, but there doesn't seem to be anyone home at first sight. Sarah climbs over the fence and is soon attacked by an angry dog. Hey! What would you do if you were stuck on a plane where the main pilot died? The film I'm going to summarize is called Horizon Line. It's a great film that mixes suspense, action, adventure, and drama. So grab that popcorn, sit in a comfortable place, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and leave a like to receive the best recaps. Fearfully, the girl climbs back on the fence, but fortunately, the owner of the house appears. His helpers load boxes of rum into the young woman's truck for the next party. Later, Sarah meets the bride Pascal and other old friends, and they celebrate together as they used to do a year ago. The best friends decide to have a drink at Pascal's bar. The bride says that the party will be on the neighboring island of Rodriguez, where a ferry is scheduled to take them early in the morning. Sarah confesses that she missed Mauritius and that the memories of the place always make her smile. Pascal asks if she wants to stay there this time, as her job allows her to work from home. The girl says she needs to be in London, but her voice reveals doubts. A boat approaches the dock, from where Jackson appears with his friends. Pascal reveals that he opened his own diving school on the island and has a girlfriend. Sarah feels uncomfortable, discovering that she will have to meet her ex-boyfriend before the wedding, as he will show up at a beach party scheduled for tonight. During the event, Sarah can't stop looking at Jackson. Finally deciding to face the situation, she decides to approach him first, which bothers Jackson's new girlfriend. Sarah tries to start a friendly conversation with her ex, but he responds indifferently. He decides to leave the party, but Sarah doesn't give up and offers to accompany him home. During the journey, Sarah manages to soften Jackson, and they decide to go have something together at his house. Sarah openly flirts with him and puts on the life jacket in a provocative way. Jackson, joking, puts the vest on her correctly. Thus, the two get very close and the feelings between them rekindle. Sarah waits for a kiss, but Jackson manages to resist the temptation. He honestly tells her that he doesn't want her to deceive him again. After that, they start to argue, remembering all the mistakes and hurts of each other. During the intense fight, they approach and kiss passionately and go to intimacy. The next morning, after a turbulent night, Sarah decides to leave without saying a word. Furious, Pascal calls her and says that she missed the only ferry that would take her to the wedding venue. In a desperate situation, Sarah goes to the house of her elderly friend, Freddie. He plans to fly to the celebration in his small plane and agrees to take her along. Sarah is very surprised to discover that Jackson has also agreed to fly with Freddie to the wedding. After picking up a box of rum, the three board the plane. Sarah tries to talk to Jackson awkwardly, but after the events of that morning, he chooses to ignore her. During the flight, Freddie invites Sarah to sit in the seat next to the pilot while Jackson sleeps. They begin to talk about relationships, and Freddie mentions his wife, who recently passed away after a serious illness. He explains to Sarah that love is not always simple, referring to her and Jackson. Sarah used to have flying lessons with Freddie, so he suggests that she takes the controls of the plane. He reminds her of the basic safety rule. After receiving the last instructions, Sarah deactivates the autopilot and prepares to take the plane's controls. Jackson wakes up, noticing that a poorly secured gas cylinder is rolling at his feet. Suddenly, Freddie begins to cough violently, struggling to breathe. Jackson tries to hold the cylinder in place when Sarah desperately screams that Freddie is having a heart attack. The pills have no effect, and in the next instant, the main pilot collapses on the steering wheel, causing the plane to go into free fall. The pipe comes loose again and creates a crack in the front window of the plane. Jackson struggles to reach Freddie and pull him off the wheel. In the last moment before crashing into the sea, Sarah manages to straighten the plane and climb. Jackson drags Freddie and tries to revive him with cardiac massage. But it's already too late. Freddy had already said goodbye to this world. Jackson covers Freddy's lifeless body with his jacket, crying. After taking the place of the main pilot, he realizes that the plane's GPS is broken and the cell phones have no signal, so they don't know where they are. Jackson, along with Sarah, tries to use the radio to communicate with the outside world. No one responds, which increases the couple's fear. Their only hope is the autopilot, which should take them to Rodriguez Island. However, it soon becomes clear that the broken cylinder damaged important instruments in the control system, including the autopilot. The situation is complicated by the fact that only half the fuel tank remains. Sarah, who learned some basic principles of flying with Freddy, needs to take the plane to a safe place. After calculating an approximate route using a compass, the girl turns the plane 180 degrees. The couple is frightened to see a storm approaching. The plane begins to shake, but Jackson is confident that they will get through before the storm cloud catches up with them. They finally make contact with Samuel, the local air traffic controller. The couple reports the situation and asks for help. The air traffic controller says they need to change direction immediately, or they will use all the remaining fuel. To reach the ground as quickly as possible, they need to fly west, directly through the storm. Jackson is not happy with this idea and asks if they can land the plane in the water. As the storm approaches, communications are lost. The couple has no choice but to fly towards the center of the storm. Lightning flashes ahead and dark clouds surround them. Jackson asks Sarah to go to the main pilot seat so she can see the instruments clearly. Sarah faces a difficult task. Despite the bad weather, she needs to keep the plane at the same height. The lightning makes the plane shake a lot, and the instruments go wild. Afraid of losing altitude, Sarah decides to climb to fly above the storm. In panic, Jackson tries to convince Sarah not to go ahead with the risky idea, but she doesn't listen to him. Finally, they reach the clear sky above the storm cloud and celebrate. But the joy ends quickly. As Freddy warned, flying too high causes altitude sickness, making Sarah faint. While unconscious, the plane begins to descend rapidly. Jackson manages to bring her back to consciousness, but Sarah cannot prevent the fall. By an incredible twist of fate, they manage to survive and stabilize the plane. During the fall, their compass broke, causing them to permanently lose their bearings. Jackson remembers how to make a compass using improvised materials. He takes a magnetized needle and places it in the rum that Sarah had brought. Thus, they manage to discover where they are, and Sarah goes back to heading west. Finally, the couple manages to exit the storm, but they used a lot of fuel to achieve this. Sarah notices that one of the tanks is almost completely empty and decides to switch to another full tank. However, the fuel level begins to drop rapidly and does not stabilize, even with time. Jackson suggests that the fuel tank may have been damaged during the storm, causing the problem. With persistence in finding and correcting the cause of the failure, he decides to exit the plane. The whole time, Sarah tries to convince him to give up on the terrible idea, but realizes that without fuel, they have no chance of survival. Jackson holds himself with a rope and asks her to reduce the speed. He carefully crawls out of the plane and, after several unsuccessful attempts, reaches the engine compartment. There, he finds the problem and fixes it with duct tape, but then he accidentally slips and falls, injuring his arm. Jackson manages to grab the bar with his uninjured arm, and Sarah, fixing the steering wheel in one position, runs to help him. The safety rope gets stuck in the plane's wheel. Sarah cuts the rope and gives him a hand to help him reach the cabin. With great effort, she manages to get Jackson inside. She examines his arm and becomes concerned when she discovers he has a serious fracture. After cleaning the wound with alcohol, she distracts Jackson and straightens his arm. Afterward, using the first aid kit, she makes an improvised tourniquet. After calming down, the couple returns to the control panel and notices that the tank only has 5% of fuel left. Sarah suggests reducing the weight to save fuel and gain time. First, Sarah throws out all the seats and luggage, which attracts the attention of a boat sailing below. Soon after, they realize that this is not enough, and they look together at Freddy's lifeless body. The girl decides to take drastic measures. She removes Freddy's family photo from the panel and puts it in the man's chest pocket. With tears in her eyes, Sarah moves the old man's body towards the exit, pushing him out. Next, Sarah decides to get rid of the drink boxes, but suddenly, Jackson has the idea of using rum as fuel. Due to Jackson's serious injury, he couldn't refill the tanks, so Sarah decides to continue with the mission. Very afraid, she goes out and climbs onto the roof of the plane. With great effort, she reaches the wing, opens the fuel tank, and begins to pour in the alcohol that Jackson hands her. After using all the bottles of rum, with some lost in the process, Sarah tries to return to the plane and almost falls. The bet was worth it. The fuel level increased a bit. Jackson spots a small island ahead, where they can try to land. He asks Sarah to return immediately, as it might be their only chance of rescue. Sarah returns safely, agrees with Jackson, and takes control as the main pilot. They communicate their intentions to the dispatcher, hoping to be heard. Sarah turns the plane back, but after a few minutes of flight, they still can't locate the island. Then, something very scary happens. The fuel runs out completely, and the plane's engine stops working. The plane begins to glide through the air and continues like this for a while. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Sarah decides to apologize to her ex-partner for all the suffering her actions caused him. Jackson also apologizes for being selfish and for not valuing his beloved's choices. Suddenly, Jackson spots a small island through the window. Sarah turns the plane with a smile on her face and begins to glide towards the land. She tries to land, but at low altitude, she completely loses control of the aircraft. Jackson desperately shouts to the dispatcher and requests an emergency landing. Despite Sarah's efforts, the plane crashes into the water and flips upside down. The water begins to quickly fill the plane, while the couple remains trapped inside. Sarah managed to open the door and swim to the surface, but saw that Jackson wasn't around. She dived again to look for him and discovered that he was unconscious and trapped in the wing of the sunken plane. Sarah grabbed a life jacket from the cabin and put it around his neck before the plane sank into the sea. Both floated to the surface, and Sarah dragged Jackson to firm ground. She performed CPR on him, and Jackson came to, coughing salt water. The two, exhausted, fell on the sand, relieved to be safe. They napped a bit, and upon waking, realized that the land around them was almost completely submerged. Sarah panicked when she realized that their chances of survival were minimal. She looked desperately around, searching for help, but only saw the vast sea around them. Gradually, the ground began to disappear beneath their feet. Sarah starts to cry, deciding that this is where her life would end. Tired and without strength, Jackson realizes he has no chance of surviving. He offers his life jacket to Sarah, but she refuses. She insists that they are a team and will stay by his side until the end. Jackson's wound opens, attracting the attention of some sharks. The two express their love for each other, feeling that the end is near. At that moment, a small fishing boat approaches after hearing their distress signals. Sarah uses her last strength to pull Jackson onto the boat. They manage to get on board before the sharks reach them. The surviving couple promises never to separate again, and they kiss. And so the film ends. Hey, what did you think of this film? Leave your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to hit the bell to be notified of new recaps. So, until next time.